Greetings, unsettled souls. Welcome to the Correct Views. Sam I.B. the Gangi doing political commentary for the media speaks. For those of you that are expecting the Dunce Cap of the Month award, maybe you haven't heard, we will be doing two of those next month. Got a little behind. I got a tooth pulled. It got late in the month. It's just easier to do it that way. However, I do have a treat. A lot of you enjoy the Fukushima videos. And due to the hectic schedule I've had of trying to secure a place to do this show at, I neglected a couple of the Fukushima stories, so they will also be in tonight's broadcast. I see people trickling in. Welcome aboard. Before we get into the news, I want to remind you that this is listener supported, and that you can support me and help me do a better show by donating at thecorrectviews@hotmail.com through PayPal, which I would appreciate very much, as a matter. Friends, here we go. Rand Paul here opposing Mr. Trump, and many of you know that I've been very vocal in the fact that I'm happy with a lot of the things that Mr. Trump has done. He has gotten us out of the TPP, he is strengthening our borders, and he's standing up to countries and working to stop outsourcing. He very likely is going to create some kind of a peace with North Korea, which could prevent us from getting into a war with China, which is something we don't want to do considering that they're a nuclear power and Z is half mad. Having said that, a lot of libertarians have lost track of a very important fact, and that is that we are no longer on the gold standard. And if we don't do something about the debt we have, particularly with that being true, then the outcome could be dire, to say the least. This is from CNBC. Ron Paul warns that market dangers are bigger than ever, even if Trump backs away from the tariff threat. Now, Rand Paul has also been saying the same thing. He's saying that we've pulled away from the gold standard and that we haven't done anything to secure the fact that we are a bankrupted nation, friends. A lot of people don't know that. We are a bankrupted nation held up by fiat currency. That's it, friends. That is it. That's all that's holding us together. And we are currently enjoying status as the world currency, but that's not always going to be the case, particularly now that some other nations are less than happy with us due to some of the horrid leadership we've had in the past, such as Obama and Bush. And on top of that, you can add to it the fact that they know our money isn't based on anything. So they're not very likely going to be diving into this with the same excitement they did for our currency that they did before. If the Fed continues on the things that they are sort of planning on doing, it's going to be a calamity, said Paul. I think we have a greater distortion of a financial danger sitting there bigger than ever before. And let's face it, when we see stocks going up, when we see these kinds of things developing, we ask ourselves, how did this change overnight? We know that Trump is obviously attracting business to make sounder decisions, but at the same time, you can only put a Band-Aid on a sword wound for so long before you're still bled out, as it were. Something's got to be done about that. And even though, I'm probably angering a lot of people that know that I support Trump here, but I don't support him in this. We do need to get back to sound money practices. And if we do not do something about the debt, then we're going to be in a horrendous problem. And that would have been just as true if Stein, Johnson, or Clinton had won. Moving on here. Mom used phone app to find missing daughter who had been killed. This is really sad. It was from Zoe Hastings. It was very unusual for her not to show up, it says. The 18-year-old high school graduate from White Rock, Texas, had planned to attend a class at the Christ of Latter-day Saints on the evening of October 11, 2015, but she never made it. Her parents, it says, reported her as missing and were going frantic with each unanswered text and call. Over the course of the night, they ultimately figured out how to use a phone location app and track down their daughter's location in a creek bed, unfortunately, near the church. When her parents arrived, there was already a crowd outside a crime scene set up by Dallas police, according to the testimony from the Dallas Morning News, They gave us the horrible news, Cheryl Hastings, the teen's mother, testified in the capital murder trial on Thursday. Zoe was found dead outside her family's crashed minivan in the creek. Dallas police said at the time that she did not die in the crash, but instead died of obvious homicidal violence. Imagine this. Not only are you in a car crash, but then you get violated in some horrendous way like this. It almost sounds like something that if it was put into a fictional movie or story, the editor would say, don't do it, it's not believable. Weeks later, they arrested Antonio Cochran, who you can see there. Authorities alleged DNA evidence found at this crime scene matched Cochran via a criminal database, and that's from TV station WFAA there. After his arrest, a spokesman for Hastings' family released a statement that said, this family, as you can imagine, is grieving, but it is also happy about the way that this community came together because it is representative of the way that Zoe lived her life. A life that she lived for others, recognizing a power that was greater than herself. At the time, police told police that they saw the teen talking to the man at the local Walgreens the day she disappeared. On Friday, another witness alleged the jury said it looked like the kidnapper was trying to sneak up on the teen as she entered the minivan. The kidnapper pushed his way into the vehicle and drove off with the teen inside. Very pretty young lady there. Cochran was pleaded not guilty. His defense attorney questioned the witness about his account since he was across the street from the alleged incident and wondered whether the person saw Cochran. It's amazing because anybody who turns on the TV can see something like forensics files, or they can see something that proves how easy it is to catch these kinds of people. And yet the foolishness seems to know no end. There's always some bonehead out there that thinks they're going to pull it off. Thankfully, they are usually wrong. Although, there are a great number of cases that are not solved. And you have to wonder how many people actually do get away with it. All right, guys, a little bit of the Fukushima stories that I told you I was going to get to. This is from The Sun, and by Fukushima, I mean anything nuclear. Quake fear. Alaska earthquake tsunami warning forced Kodiak residents to flee to high ground after a 7.9 tremor sparked the alert off the U.S. coast. The huge earthquake off the coast of Alaska sparked tsunami warnings, and residents in coastal towns close to the epicenter were taken in the night by warning sirens, awoken, I should say, and urged to flee their homes for ground at least 100 feet above sea level. It was noted as it was a warning for an extraordinary threat to life. After a few intense hours, the tsunami was canceled, allowing the people to return to their homes and shelters. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I will scroll down it so that those of you who wish to can do so from my screen. But I'm going to say this. We are seeing an extremely high amount of earthquake activity. Almost biblical, the diverse places that we are seeing them. And this is important because there are people that want to continue operating nuclear power plants and even building new ones. And a great majority of those are put on the coast where something like this can happen. So when we hear about these tsunamis, we have to understand, we hear about these quakes, we have to believe what we're being told, that this could be a substantial problem that could jeopardize the lives of millions of people, friends. This is also from this, real quick. This is a Daily Star, my fault. I was looking at the little red ad, and that's what I get for assuming. U.S. nuke dome leak, fatal radioactive waste from 43 tests pouring into the ocean. The Integral Atoll was used by the U.S. government to test 30 megatons of weapons equivalent to 2,000 Hiroshima blasts from 1948 to 1958. More than 8,000 people would later work to clean up the Pacific Islands, shifting 110,000 cubic yards of contaminated soil and debris to the blast center. Debris. The 30-foot deep crater on Rennet Island, northeast of Australia, would have been entombed in a concrete dome. It's 350 feet across and 16 inches thick. But now, the dome, weathered by decades of exposure, is feared that rising seas and storms could see all the radioactive material pour into the ocean. Paul Grigo, who took part in the cleanup and blames the radiation for a host of health problems, said the dome was never fit for that purpose. He said we were given an impossible task, cleaning up radioactive fallout from 43 nuclear bombs. When I first arrived, the dome's blast crater was open to the ocean. It continued to be full of seawater even after it was sealed off from the ocean. During my 10-hour workday, I witnessed the water level of the crater rise and lower as the tide came in and out. Now, let us pause there and understand exactly what that means, shall we? They're telling us in no uncertain terms that the problems that we're seeing in many instances that pertain to cancers, the things that are sickening us today, tied to that. And of course, at least again, you have to understand that these are just as radioactive now as they were when it first started. The time period is nothing on the scale when you're talking nuclear hazards like this. It might as well have just happened. Many of these poisons are poisons for millions of years, okay, millions, billions of years. And it's not something that you can just wish away. Or he continued, no attempt was made to drain the crater or line it before the radioactive waste was dumped into it. The coral was created. The island is porous, and the shock from numerous nuclear weapons tests had also fractured the coral. From the first day forward, the water has flowed into the lagoon with the tide, creating a gigantic radioactive toilet that is flushed about twice each day into the Pacific Ocean, which of course is what's being poisoned from Fukushima. And I experienced the power of the typhoon while I was there, and I believe the dome could have be just one typhoon away from a breach. The sea level and ground level are becoming more and more to be the same, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about sea level rise, land subsidence, or both. Water will always win out over man-made objects. So, well, what have we learned? Well, we've learned that we were told that you could keep this stuff under wraps, remember? We were told that there's ways to put the cat back in the bag, as it were. There isn't. That's why all things nuclear lead to death. And if you're somebody that's in a mutual fund and you're somehow supporting or investing in GE in the stock market, or TEPCO, or Westinghouse, DuPont, you are part of the problem because you are allowing these giants to continue doing what they do. Speaking of cat out of the bag, we'll let the cat came out here play for a minute. Oh, yeah. Cat missing for 10 years. Burned in a California wildfire. Returned to the Longmont family. This is kind of interesting.